Good morning, my esteemed colleagues and associates. It's great to be with you today. It was at this time last year that I presented an analogy to our Board of Education that compared the district to a redwood tree, which needed a trunk of aligned facilities and academic priorities, the energy of strong community engagement and local innovation at the roots, and the trickle down of nourishing water from the canopy above to grow into a solid yet organic and dynamic organization. Using this visual seemed to work pretty well in getting our board centered on a student achievement plan that included new diplomas and grade reconfiguration, as well as a facility strategy that formed the backbone of our $250 million bond election. So I thought I would return to the tree's image for this address today. Three elements of the redwood's physiology are crucial to our discussion of student achievement. First, coastal redwoods begin their lives as tiny seeds. In contrast to the tree's magnificent size, redwood cones are very small, only about an inch long. Each cone contains 14 to 24 tiny seeds, and it would take well over 100,000 seeds to weigh a pound. Second, redwood trees are well known for their phenomenal and rapid growth. Given the right conditions, redwood saplings can grow more than a foot annually and can reach heights of more than 320 feet, about as tall as a 30-story building, with trunks more than 24 feet in diameter. Third, the trees sustain this growth by drawing moisture and energy from both the bottom and the top of their plant structure. During the winter months, the tree's roots absorb moisture from heavy coastal rains, and then as water evaporates from the leaves, water is pulled upward in a continuous chain up through the trunk. Special aspects of redwood cells may help water keep rising against gravity to these extreme heights. Then during the summer months, redwoods create their own rain by capturing coastal fog in their lofty canopies. The trees depend on the fog for more than 30% of their water needs. I submit that these unique aspects of redwoods are common to the students who enter our classrooms. They arrive in preschool or kindergarten as, of course, tiny seeds, presenting both bodies and minds still in very early stages of development, but possessing massive growth potential. Shortly after planting themselves in the soil of our classrooms and schools, they then begin, with the right conditions, to experience rapid growth. Maybe not a foot a year physically, but perhaps hundreds of feet a year if we were to measure that growth by the capacities of their brains. Yet in order for this growth to occur, children must be able to draw energy simultaneously from the roots, i.e. their parents, teachers, and communities, and from the canopy above, i.e. district resources, strategies, and leaders like ourselves. I would also submit that without collecting, analyzing, and using achievement data at the individual student level, we simply cannot know whether students are growing or indeed whether they are even present. As an aside, I wanted to just digress for a second. This photograph here was actually taken by a Sandy resident, and I believe a parent of students in our schools. I don't know whether these are his kids or not, but he won a national photography contest with this photo that he took this last year, showing these two little kids walking into a redwood grove in California. So, again, I want to make the connection between these trees and our students, and I believe it's really critical that we have this data available for our use and analysis at the individual student level so that we know who's there, who's not, who's growing, and who's not. I'm convinced that in every one of our schools, unfortunately, we have some ghost trees, like these ill-fated albino redwood saplings, which researchers at the University of California, Santa Cruz and Stanford have just begun to study. Lacking chlorophyll, which as you know is vital for photosynthesis, these saplings have no way to obtain energy from light and thus no way to manufacture the food they need for growth. What the scientists have discovered so far about these rare species is that these albinos have a weak wood structure, have narrow and constricted internal vessels, and cannot live independently. They remain forever sprouted on the parental trunk and are in essence a form of a parasite, leaching nutrients off the mother tree they cannot make for themselves. And of course, to most observers, they are, because of their white color, invisible. If we fail to provide the proper conditions for growth for our students, they will suffer the same fate. Their nutrition will be deprived, their growth will be stunted, and they will slowly recede into the vapor until they disappear quietly into the shadows of our society, never to become independent, purposeful human beings. Therefore, it is just simply non-negotiable that we provide the proper conditions for growth and that we engage every single child in the mission of preparing for the future by showing them how growth occurs and giving them the tools to reach for the very upper limits of their potential. If you have not heard me before in the past 2 years, please hear me now. The mission of this school district is to get all students ready for college and career by the end of high school, period. If you do not agree with this mission or share my passion for it, you may want to think about joining another team, because this is where we will be going in this district. So why is this so important? For starters, college and career preparation is a legal imperative as articulated by the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education. You can see here part of the text of that decision, where the court stated that education is the very foundation of good citizenship. Today it is a principal instrument in awakening the child to cultural values, in preparing him for later professional training, which I thought was an interesting phrase as I went back and read this, and in helping him to adjust normally to his environment. In these days, it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he is denied the opportunity of an education. Such an opportunity, where the state has undertaken to provide it, is a right which must be made available on equal terms. In other words, we don't provide the top 10 or 20% a college track and something else for everybody else. It has to be done on equal terms. Next, college and career preparation is an educational imperative. In its final report issued in 2001, the National Commission on the High School Senior Year stated, "In the agricultural age, post-secondary education was a pipe dream for most Americans. In the industrial age, it was the birthright of only a few. By the space age, it became common for many. Today, it is just common sense for all." And again, they stated this 10 years ago, so I think this is even more true today. Finally, college and career preparation for all is an economic imperative. In a 2007 report titled "Tough Choices, Tough Times," the National Center on Education and the Economy stated, "This is a world in which a very high level of preparation in reading, writing, speaking, mathematics, science, literature, history, and the arts will be an indispensable foundation for everything that comes after for most members of the workforce." So now that I've explained the why, let's get to the what. What are my specific expectations for principals and teachers in terms of their roles in accomplishing college and career preparation for all students? To put it quite simply, I expect all teachers and principals to be able to do the following for every student in their classrooms. First, articulate the student's strengths. Second, identify the student's weaknesses. Third, explain what you are actually doing to improve the strengths and remedy the weaknesses, not just what you're thinking about doing or planning to do, but what you are actually doing on a day-to-day basis. And fourth, be able to explain to parents 1, 2, and 3, right? Be able to explain to parents what they can expect specifically from you as a principal or you as a teacher to help their student progress along this path towards college and career readiness. To be a little more specific, I expect all teachers and principals to implement, as we discussed at our administrators conference in August, a response to intervention framework that includes these core elements. Ongoing student assessment. Of course, that includes universal screening, progress monitoring, and use of research-based measures of achievement like our CBM tests and our ACT series and so forth. Second, determination of students' instructional needs based on multiple data points taken in context over time and implementation of high-quality research-based instructional strategies. So I want to be clear about this, that I'm not desiring or intending for this district to be focused on a single exam. We're not talking about high-stakes tests here. We're talking about multiple data points that we start collecting in kindergarten and that we continue to use over time through the student's graduation to determine how they're doing. Third, a system of tiered instruction that matches intensity and duration of instruction to individual student needs. And fourth, continuous information to parents about their child's progress and the interventions that are being used. Let me just make one point here quickly about this third point, the system of tiered instruction. This does not mean tracking. This does not mean, again, that the tiers are not top 20% of gifted and advanced kids get the college track, and then we have a big group in the middle that gets another track, and then we have special ed kids that get another track. We're talking about the Common Core, but that instructional strategies are tiered so that individual students' needs are met. As Dr. George Batch instructed us in August, our focus should not be on whether the student is causing the performance discrepancy, but instead, in every classroom, with every teacher, and with every principal, we should be asking what part of the interaction of the curriculum, the instruction, the learner, of course, and the learning environment should be altered to give the student a maximum opportunity to learn. So we've talked now about the why, we've talked about the what, and I'm sure the big question you all have is how? How will this be done? We've talked for several months, I think, in the abstract about college readiness, database decision making, and even RTI, and I realize that all of these things, not only to principals and teachers, but even to parents and our other stakeholders, may seem kind of confusing, and they may not necessarily see how all these various dots connect. So I want to try to do that now in a line that ends with college readiness for all of our students. My vision is that every student, not just students with disabilities, will have a concise, straightforward, individualized plan that I'm submitting we would call the College Action Plan, or a CAP to tie in with the graduation CAP. So a plan, if you will, that spells out for every parent and student what we will do to grow the student into a mature and solid tree that can survive independently for decades to come. Now, before you all get nervous and anxious and think about an IEP as a 20 or 25 page document with all these signatures and all these prescriptions down to the minute of all these services that kids are going to get and so on, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that's very, very simple and straightforward, a tool, not necessarily a document, but a tool, a digital tool that we can all use, whether we're those of us in this room, whether it's our teachers, whether it's our parents, that they can pull that up and see very quickly where their child is and what we are doing on a daily or weekly or monthly basis to help their child. So my vision of this, or my concept of this, is that this college action plan would focus on these 4 questions, which again we talked about in August with Dr. Batch, and which form kind of the core of a response to intervention framework across the board. 1, it should articulate what we need the student to do. So specifically, it needs to show what are the benchmarks that we're expecting students to meet. In the elementary school, of course, we'll start using the CBM benchmarks and the CRT benchmarks, or whatever the CRTs become when we end up with new assessments. And then at the secondary level, we'll start using the ACT college readiness benchmarks, along with benchmarks that we'll establish with common assessments in other content areas like foreign language and the arts and PE and other things that may not be tested in quite the same way that we would on a CBM measure or on the ACT. So, but we do want to be very clear. A parent should be able to pull that up and say, oh, okay, I get it. I see what my child should be able to do, what level of proficiency they should be able to meet. I'm much more concerned about a parent knowing that than whether their child has a C or an A, because that doesn't really tell them anything. We need to use objective learning achievement benchmarks that they can understand. Second, this plan needs to articulate simply, not in a 20-page document, but in some kind of a concise fashion, why can't the student do it? Where are their points of weakness, and what do we know about that? In other words, why isn't he or she at these benchmarks we need them to be at? Third, what needs to be done? And so what I'm kind of envisioning here is just a short paragraph where we articulate the interventions that are being applied to that child as part of the school day. And then there should be some explanation of whether these interventions are working, or what our plan is to determine whether they're working. Next. I want this tool, again, which I envision as a technology tool, not a big paper document, to be scaffolded on these components. One, I think it needs to be developed by our information technology staff with your input and ideas. So I envision this to be a collaborative process. I want it to be a tool that people will use. And so that's going to be important. But obviously it needs to be something that fits within our structure, that's not going to crash our system. It needs to be something that's going to be pretty easy for them, I think, to put together. And they've assured me that they can do this. Second, it needs to be readily accessible to teachers, administrators, our teacher specialists, our parents, everybody, in terms of not just format but transparency. I'm envisioning a portal, whether it's right if you get to it from Skyward or off our main website or the school website. I don't know how we'll do that, but where it's, you won't have to hunt around for an hour to try to find where to go. It's going to be very accessible to people to find it, and then the format itself should be very accessible. And kind of what I have in mind is just a visual that uses this image of the tree. So on the right-hand side, maybe we have a full-grown redwood tree that's got the college readiness benchmark scores on there, and then the smaller tree on the left is the student, and it should go up every year, right? And so by the time they're a junior or senior, that tree should match the one on the right. And the one on the left, of course, if you're in the first or second grade, is probably just using CBM data or whatever else we're using. By the time they get into secondary school, it's going to have a few more pieces of data on there, but that the parent can see from the start of first grade to the end of first grade whether that tree's moved up a foot, right? Or whether it's stayed where it was. So just something really simple like that. And then finally, I think it should be used as the focus of our existing parent-teacher and SEOP conferences. So I'm not envisioning, I'm not trying to make work here. I'm not trying to add on to our existing structure. But as the example that I like to use is with middle school parent-teacher conferences. I've been to a number of these now. And in most middle schools in our district, and I would guess across the valley, they go something like this. You walk in and you have a welcome in the auditorium by the principal, and then they turn you loose in the gymnasium, and you walk around for anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, depending on how long the lines are. Wait in line for 30 to 45 minutes per teacher for 60 seconds with the teacher for them to say, here's your child's grade, here's how much homework they're missing, and here's how many times they've been absent. There is zero discussion about what they know how to do, what they've learned, what they haven't learned, where they're going, what the plan is to remedy, none of that. And so it seems to me that, even if we kept that format, we need to have a tool for those 60 seconds that says, here's where your kid is. And frankly, that meeting shouldn't be a surprise to any parent because they should be able to pull that up on their own and do it any day of the week. So I think it needs to be something that forms the core of what we're doing with parent-teacher conferences, however they're formatted. Let me kind of bring this full circle now by explaining, kind of going back to the what. And that is, I want to be clear about what I expect at the school level and at the district level, now that we've talked quite a bit about what our expectations are with individual students. First of all, every school needs to make AYP every year. Now, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act is likely to get reauthorized. Who knows when that will occur, but it's likely to be reauthorized in the next year or two. Whether we still have a law called No Child Left Behind is obviously open to debate. We don't know what will happen with that. And we don't know whether we'll even still be using this term, adequate yearly progress. But whether we have a term like AYP or whether we have some state accountability law, whatever the measure is for school progress, I expect every school to meet it every year. That's a given. Beyond that, I want to see every school making forward progress on the measures we're using to determine college and career preparation. I've said this for many years. I've never really had a problem with No Child Left Behind because I think it's shown a light into some dark places where the light needed to be shined. I recognize it's got a lot of problems, especially in terms of the intersection with special ed. But my biggest problem with No Child Left Behind is that the standard's not too high, it's too low. It's talking about a minimum proficiency standard And we've left this huge gap between there and what kids need to be ready to do when they leave high school. So AYP for me that's a given. That's a minimum standard. What we want to do now is use our assessments and our data to determine forward progress towards college readiness, which is upping the floor, raising the floor quite a bit, obviously. So I want to make sure that every school is making forward progress on these college and career readiness assessments, our CBMs, our CRTs, or again, whatever those end up being called with our state assessments, ACT tests, and AP and IB exams. Specifically, by 2015, so 5 years from now, I want to see 50%, 50.01%, or the majority of our high school students meeting all 4 ACT college readiness benchmark scores and qualifying for either an advanced or honors diploma and be able to articulate a specific post-secondary purpose for themselves. In other words, even if they can't say, I know I want to go to the University of Utah, I at least want them to say, I'm planning to go to a 4-year college and this is what I know I need to do to get there. And I'd also like to see all 4 of our existing high schools be on the U.S. News and World Reports and Newsweek lists of the top 100 high schools, which basically the way they calculate that, assuming that you meet AYP in the school, you can't even get on the list if you don't meet AYP, but assuming you do, then what they do is they calculate the percentage of the total student body who has passed 1 or more AP or IB exams. It's not based on how many kids take them. It's based on how many take them and then how many pass them. So I'd like to see us land on those lists. And then 10 years out, so by 2020, have 75% of our high school students meeting all 4 ACT college readiness benchmark scores and qualifying for one of our advanced or honors diplomas. And then all 5 of our high schools, because we'll have a high school in Draper by then, landing on these same lists of national rankings based on the percentage of the student body who takes and passes an AP or an IB exam. Now, lest you think this is an unreasonable goal, I realize this is a big goal, but right now we're sitting at about 25% of our ACT takers who can meet all 4 of those college readiness benchmarks. So I'm talking about doubling that number in the next 5 years and then increasing it another 25% by 2020. So, I think given the demographics of this district, that goal is well within sight if we can do some things differently in the schools. Let me just close this by making it clear that as far as I'm concerned, we are a team in this. I recognize that I'm articulating some goals here and they're big goals, but I certainly don't want this to come across as trying to lay a big burden on you or on teachers or on anybody else that's unreasonable. I realize that you have some expectations of me, as you should. So from me, you'll get the following: relentless leadership towards these goals and encouragement. I'm not about taking people's heads off here. I'm about let's do things better and let's encourage everyone to do better. I just read a very interesting autobiography by Drew Brees, who's a quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. And he talked about his journey from college to the San Diego Chargers to the New Orleans Saints, and then kind of what's happened over the last 3 or 4 years in New Orleans that led up to them winning the Super Bowl last year. And it was really fascinating. But one of the themes of it was that when people are feeling downtrodden, like they were in New Orleans, what you need is a team that inspires people. And I hope that our district level team becomes that team for out in the schools. And I'm not suggesting that our teachers and people out in the schools are downtrodden. I hope they're not. But my point is, I think it's incumbent on us to create some energy and create a spirit of teamwork that people want to be a part of. Second, you have a commitment from me to try to secure adequate resources and then align those resources with with these priorities. I mean, we can't do this for free. We know that. And so you have my commitment to continue to fight for resources, not just internally with our own budget and with our own taxpayers, but with the state legislature, and to seek external funding, which I believe is going to become more and more available to schools that really want to be progressive in this area. And then finally, you have my commitment to a focus on holding people accountable for results, beginning with me and my senior staff, our teachers, our principals, all of our district office staff, our state legislature, our business community, our parents, and yes, even the school board. They need to be a part of this too. So this isn't just about holding teachers accountable, and I think that's one of the things that's making the whole reform effort in the United States so negative right now, is that it's all focused, it seems to be all focused on teachers, and we know that's a real pivot point, but we've got to hold ourselves accountable too, and I think we will do that. I will just close, next one, by stating that my belief is we'll succeed if we love these kids and pour everything we have into helping them achieve not just minimal proficiency, but majestic heights. You know, one of the things that really irks me, frankly, is when I hear people with college degrees and in leadership positions say, not every kid needs to go to college. And what I always want to say is, would you say that to your own child? And you know they wouldn't. You know they wouldn't. So, you know, we need to love these kids. We've just been talking in our office about, you know, a couple of the students that are currently living at our homeless shelter at the Road Home, and the efforts that they're making academically. And I just think it is just, it's just unacceptable to assume that because of a kid's living conditions, or the fact that their parents don't have an education, or that they're poor, or whatever, that number one, they don't desire to have what we all have, and number two, that they're not capable of it. They come from different starting places, and we know that. But I really believe we have an obligation to get them all to the same end. I mean, when that seed drops off the cone of the redwood tree, it falls in different places on the ground, but it's all, you know, given the right conditions, they all reach the same height at the end of the day. So I want to just show you a little video to wrap this up, which I think kind of summarizes this nicely and goes back to this image of the redwood tree. This was actually done by kind of an advocacy group in California that works to save redwood tracts, redwood forest. But as you listen to it, I hope you'll maybe, if it doesn't cause too much cognitive dissonance for you, try to insert the word student every time you hear the word tree or redwood, especially at the very end. They use a quote by Edward Markham that talks about the immortality of these trees, and the fact that in order to attain their full height and immortality, so to speak, they need us. They need human effort. So let's just watch that, and then I'll be happy to take any questions you have when we're done.